100% of music is political. Okay? That music either supports the status quo or challenges the status quo. And so every artist is political. Now,
Happy Pride, everybody. I wanted to do a double feature video for Juneteenth and Pride, but did you also know that June is Black Music Month? I didn't know that until a couple weeks ago. So it seems like all of the pieces are coming together for this video that I've had in mind for a while. I still have plenty of videos I'm working on and through, and now that I've quit my toxic job,
take this job and shut it. I ain't working here no more.
And have a more easygoing one. It will allow me so much more time and energy to do the things that I truly love. I have a lot of the same problems, but I have so much less of them, so I feel free.
I'm poor, Black, I may even be ugly, but dear God, I'm here.
Things will always be hard, but they don't have to be harder. I've gotten a lot of new viewers and subscribers lately, and I really appreciate everything. I really popped off on the drink video that I created and then the one about patriarchy recently, so welcome to everybody. But I wanted to take a little moment to talk about myself and my gender and my sexual identity, just a little bit.
Hey, it's Michelle Visage. Do you want gay shit?
So yeah, you see me and you think cisgender heterosexual woman. A few of the comments I have received also have been really gendered and assumptive about me, despite me trying to use pretty intentional language in my videos and comments and having my pronouns visible. Which is okay, because I haven't explicitly told anybody in video format, but I implore you to allow folks to let you know who they are when they tell you. So basically, my experience with gender has always been an awkward one until very recently. I grew up thinking that I was a failed girl or a woman, straight up. I was never interested in dolls or makeup, and I wasn't good at them either. And I was too busy following my brother around. I wanted to be feminine, but always independent and capable. And intentionally, I'm trying to avoid using the word strong in my identity because of racism.
I think people have such a perception of a Black woman being so strong that we're just supposed to take anything thrown at us. And then when we don't, we're weak. Well, no, I'm supposed to get beat down by everybody that comes near me? No, I'll be that bee. I'll be that bitch. If that means I have to stand for me and I have to show other young women that you should not let people take advantage of you, no matter who they are.
There are better synonyms out there to describe Black women and femmes in your life. The people I had crushes on and looked up to were people like Vegeta from Dragon Ball Z or Cassandra from Wayne's World. For me, it was a culmination of wanting to be them and also being attracted to them, which is how I found out I was bisexual or pansexual. I liked my femininity cloaked in muscles, crop tops, and heavy ammunition. I liked my masculinity as soft and vulnerable as possible. For most of my life, I always felt like I was doing gender wrong. And I was, to an extent. Gender is a performance, a song, and a dance in society.
You know, you're born naked and the rest is drag.
For Black women or those who are perceived as Black women like myself, it is a tight rope walk that you will never succeed at, no matter how much you contort yourself or try.
It's one thing to say that gender is performed, and that's a little different from saying gender is performative. When we say gender is performed, we usually mean that we've taken on a role, we're acting in some way, and that our acting or our role playing is crucial to the gender that we are and the gender that we present to the world. To say that gender is performative is a little different, because for something to be performative means that it produces a series of effects. We act and walk and speak and talk in ways that consolidate an impression of being a man or being a woman. You know, I was walking down the street in Berkeley when I first arrived several years ago, and a young woman who was, I think, in high school leaned out of her window and she yelled, "Are you a lesbian?" And she was looking to harass me. Or maybe she was just freaked out, or she thought I looked like I probably was one and wanted to know. But instead I just turned around and I said, "Yes, I am." And that really shocked her. We act as if that being of a man or that being of a woman is actually an internal reality or something that's simply true about us, a fact about us. Actually, it's a phenomenon that's being produced all the time and reproduced all the time.
I'll be releasing a video about desirability and gender eventually, so keep posted on that. But because of this boa constrictor-like vice around me to perform femininity in a particular way for everybody else outside of myself, I tapped out of the fight.
One of the reasons why I love talking about aesthetics, and I say this all the time, is I love the dissonance between people thinking that aesthetics, meaning the way that we adorn our bodies, how we choose to wear our hair, what clothes we choose to wear, what shoes. It's basically like how you move through the world. How do you make yourself? People think that that stuff is silly and frivolous and nonsense, and it doesn't mean anything. But I love to dig into why it matters and how it matters. All aesthetics are political. Stuff that we often assume is natural and normal is not that. The stuff that we associate with femininity and masculinity have nothing to do with biology.
But like I said before, I thought I was a failed woman. Britney Spears said I'm not a girl, not yet a woman, to describe herself as a teenager and a young adult, but this is where I feel I land on the gender spectrum. I identify with femininity and femhood on some level, but I'm not a girl or a woman.
I think everybody has an experience of non-binary. Everybody can recognize the feeling of not quite fitting into a category.
It's never felt like an identity I fully embraced. I had an aunt who used to call me little girl whenever she wanted me to do something, and I remember crying frequently about that. And not because I didn't like that she was trying to reprimand me, but because I wanted to be called my name. I did not want to be called little girl. That distinction to me was very important. It's hard for people sometimes to recognize that Black people are non-binary. And it's a part of why I have such an aversion to non-Black people saying girl to me or using the word girl in language. It's a racial undertone that happens, like a character or a cartoon.
Because I really struggle with the pseudo Black scent thing and her just being so confused about things sometimes. I'm just like, it hasn't really, yeah.
You know, when I was watching the episode, like to refresh before coming, I was like, do I bring up the whole Black scent thing? Am I making too big of a deal of this?
You're not.
But like, it definitely comes out.
Absolutely.
And it like it's very uncomfortable to me.
Like, I don't say, ooh, girl, or hey, girl, or what's up, girl, to people in my day-to-day. So why are you saying it to me when you see me or when you are commenting to me? My mom says girl to me as an exclamation, but she's the only person that does in my entire life. And I promise you, I have so many Black women in my family, and my mom and some of my aunts are the only people who do that. I only like when Black femmes use collective and shared feminine language with me, like girl or sis, things like that. Otherwise, to me, it feels like a microaggression, just straight up being honest.
This is my real hair.
Oh, okay.
I just snatched this up earlier. Wait till I get my hair transplant. It's gonna be over for you hoes.
It's my real hair. Yes, this is my motherfucking real hair. You talking about?
Yeah, people did tag me that.
There's no reason why people in my comments or at the office say, ooh, girl, or hey, girl, when they're commenting or talking to me, especially when they don't do it to anybody else. And that's what makes it a microaggression. I find that misogynoir, because of this, is very pervasive, and people do not even know when they're participating in it. To change your language when you're speaking to me is to assume I'm a certain way because of how I look and who I am as a person. You won't know how I want to be related to unless you ask me. And that's just with everybody. Prince also said, I'm not a woman, I'm not a man, I'm something you'll never understand. And I like to describe that as my non-binary identity to folks who still don't understand when I say that I'm not a Black woman, but society views me as one, so it's a political identity for me. This is what I mean by that. It's like how some trans men still identify as lesbians.
Trans men can be lesbians. I heard someone on TikTok say this. Now this conversation, I feel like my opinion on this has changed drastically from when I was younger, but to be honest, I don't really care what people call themselves. I don't care if a trans man wants to call himself a lesbian. Just to kind of maybe explain a bit of context for that, because I know it sounds strange. A lot of people in the trans mass community went through, like, decades of life identifying as a lesbian and being a big part of the lesbian community, mixing with lesbians, being in lesbian relationships. And I don't think there's any benefit in telling people what they can and cannot call themselves. I understand it sounds confusing, and I understand the view of, like, people thinking that trans men calling themselves lesbians makes the rest of the trans community look like lesbians and girls. But at the same time, I just think we should just let people do what they want in regards to how they identify. Like, how much impact is, you know, Ricky, who calls himself a lesbian, gonna have on your life? I just think we should chill out on the whole outrage of people identifying with things that you don't understand. If I see a trans guy calling himself a lesbian, I'm not personally hurt by that, because he's not calling me a lesbian. So why would I care?
Non-binary and trans people do not always have 100% bad experiences with their assigned genders at birth, and there's still a lot of sacred space that people hold for that. Black womanhood taught me a lot and gave me a lot. So it is my political identity in a lot of ways as an intersectional feminist. I love the endless possibilities of gender for everybody, for however you identify. Gender is something that you can define for yourself if you allow yourself, but it can be incredibly challenging for folks who do not see themselves reflected to them as a possibility. Which brings me to the point of this video. I just wanted to amplify and highlight Black music, Black people, and Black queerness in a video. Sort of like a love letter. As with most cultural movements, the Black and queer underground were and are at the forefront. This story has been told a few times over, but I wanted to break down how the death of disco, racism, and homophobia led to the electronic music renaissance called techno and house music. Before we talk about the death of disco, let's talk about the birth of disco. The birth of disco music is closely tied to the cultural and political landscapes of the 1970s. Emerging primarily in the United States, disco became a defining genre of the decade. Disco drew heavily from the music of Black and Latino communities, especially funk, soul, and Latin music. Pioneers like James Brown and Sly and the Family Stone laid the groundwork with their rhythmic and dance-orientated music. The New York City nightlife of the early 1970s, particularly gay and queer clubs, were the crucial development places of disco. Clubs like The Law, founded by David Mancuso, and later Studio 54 and Paradise Garage, were spaces where DJs experimented with seamless transitions and extended dance mixes. Disco was a reflection of the ongoing civil rights movement promoting inclusivity and diversity. It provided a voice and a safe space for marginalized communities, especially Black Americans, Latinos, and the LGBTQ+ community. Discos were often safe havens for the LGBTQ community during a time when they faced significant discrimination. The music and culture of disco celebrated freedom, acceptance, and the right to express one's identity without fear. Prominent LGBTQ+ DJs and performers such as Sylvester played crucial roles in the disco scene, further cementing the genre's association with the queer rights movement and visibility. Sylvester is an underrated non-binary icon because truly he was a pioneer of what gender nonconformity and gender fluidity is and what could be in a rigid and unwelcoming society.
Back then, a lot of that was not accepted, but he didn't care. He said, you be you no matter what. I'm going to be me. They either like me or they don't.
His confidence and cadence inspired generations of people to be themselves, including me. I can relate to him so much as a Pentecostal singing church kid who left the church to dance and thrive in freedom.
It was in the contract that he could not use glitter because it got stuck in the cracks of the floor. So what did he do?
So what I did to make them loosen up a little bit, just before the curtain, I saved this just before the curtain went up, and I ran around backstage and I threw pounds of glitter all on their hair, all on their instruments, all over everything.
They must have loved that.
They did love it. They played great.
Midway through the Opera House show, Harry Britt, representing the city, gave Sylvester, in front of everybody, the keys to the city and declared it Sylvester Day.
It was not just a musical event, it was kind of a socio-cultural event, and also like recovery for San Francisco from a number of traumas that San Francisco had been suffering from. So the Jonestown Massacre and the assassinations of Harvey Milk and George Moscone. And of course, Harvey Milk had been a supporter of Sylvester
It was the year of a lot of anti-gay legislation that people were pushing through. It was a very, very ugly and traumatic time. When Sylvester played the Opera House, really just after that trauma, he brought people together and reminded them that we are happy with who we are. We celebrate who we are. He got people singing Mighty Real all together in one room, slowed down like a hymn. You know, there was something so healing about that moment.
People often look back on the 70s as a time of hippie love only and gentle protest, but the world was very much on fire. Much like right now, the 1970s saw significant urban decay and economic challenges in many American cities. People were protesting the war in Vietnam, and soldiers were dying and returning, injured and unemployed. Sexism and racism were still a constant battle in everyday life, and queer spaces were actively being under attack. Disco provided an escape and a form of rebellion against the grim realities of everyday life, offering joy, unity, and a sense of community. Disco was a part of a broader countercultural movement that rejected conservative norms of the time. Its emphasis on hedonism, pleasure, and liberation, and socializing was a direct challenge to the status quo. I've gotten into debates with pretentious punks and musicians alike who didn't want to admit that disco was political and punk music.
100% of music is political, okay? That music either supports the status quo or challenges the status quo. And so every artist is political. Now, Justin Bieber probably and Selena Gomez probably not self-identify as political artists, but their music, while often very entertaining and loved by their fan bases, is the bread and circuses of our times. You know, if you're not questioning authority, you're tacitly submitting to authority. And that's not to say that I don't have a long list of booty-shaking jams on my iPod, and there's certainly a place for that, but I am also conscious of the fact that in my own work, that what you say and what you do matters. That you are a historical agent, and that if you don't have your hands on the steering wheel, somebody else does.
There's a particular arrogance some people have towards disco, and if they dislike disco, they have inherited that from their older brothers, uncles, and fathers who participated in the Disco Demolition Night and the anti-disco brigade of the late 70s and the early 80s.
In 1978 and 79, as disco was really hitting its peak, so was the backlash against disco.
Then it became very frowned upon. You know, this whole no more of that. That's not cool anymore.
And it really came to a head in Disco Demolition Night in Comiskey Park in Chicago.
This passive yet overwhelmingly aggressive disdain towards disco and their fans was open bigotry. The backlash against disco was a slow burn that was epitomized by the infamous Disco Demolition Night in 1979, which had underlying racial and homophobic undertones.
Disco sucks! Disco sucks! Disco sucks!
July 12th, 1979. A twilight doubleheader at Comiskey Park, the White Sox versus the Tigers. Between games, 24-year-old Steve Dahl, the popular disc jockey for Chicago rock station Loop 98, would take the field at the head of his so-called anti-disco army to blow up thousands of disco records.
Every day I would play a disco record and drag the needle across it, you know, and scratch it and then blow it up. But I tapped into something. There's an undercurrent of hatred for disco.
While disco started out underground, in the 1970s, it was embraced by the music industry, bolstered by the hit movie Saturday Night Fever. Before long, disco dominated radio stations and singles charts. In Chicago, this inspired a backlash from rock fans, led by radio shock jock Steve Dahl, who proclaimed, "Disco sucks." On Disco Demolition Night, July 12, 1979, Dahl blew up a pile of disco records between White Sox games at Comiskey Park, leading to a riot on the field.
At the end of the game, you got like thousands of people that's disco sucks, disco sucks.
there was a racial element and a homophobic element, whether they intended to or not. That was a very divisive moment in our history.
The anti-disco sentiment was a reaction against the genre's association with Black, Latino, and queer culture. By the late 1970s, disco had become ubiquitous. It dominated the airwaves, permeated popular culture, and led to the commercialization of the genre. Many people grew tired of its pervasive presence. I find the attitude of disliking disco is very similar to how mainstream white culture will go back and forth between disliking and liking hip-hop and its identity. White America dislikes hip-hop, but they love Eminem. White America disliked disco, but they loved ABBA. It is only useful as a trend and when it's in a particular niche. When Black culture begins to dominate or win the popularity contest overall, that's when issues start to arise. Rock music fans and artists often criticize disco for its perceived lack of musicianship and its association with mainstream artists and commercialism. Disco was seen by some as overly manufactured and lacking the authenticity and rebellious spirit of rock, which is just racism, to be frank. With people like Nile Rodgers creating some of the most iconic disco and funk compositions of all time, it is nothing but anti-blackness to assume a lack of skill or music theory behind disco.
The way chic records were made was we would have our basic parts. And the way that the grooves developed is that if a person, so if I wrote the charts, So I Want Your Love, and that's a bad example because that was written completely 100%. But like, let's say, for example, Good Times. When I wrote Good Times, Bernard had never heard it before because I had just written it that day. And he walked into the studio and he heard me, Tony, Raymond, and Rob playing, you know, down, 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 down. So he walks in and goes, wow, what is that? And the engineer, Bob Clearmountain, says, I don't know, it's something Niall came up with this morning.
I find this happens a lot in musician circles in general. If someone is self-taught or learned without classes or access to conventional tools or around the traditional framework of what a musician's supposed to be, white musicians will discredit them as not being a musician or not making real music. Black diasporic musicians often learn through community and self-discipline practice, and it is just as valid. My father taught himself how to play the guitar and bass. He's still a guitar and bass player. I taught myself the synthesizer, and I'm teaching myself Ableton. I'm still a producer. The backlash had undertones of resentment against these communities, which were often marginalized and oppressed. On July 12, 1979, Disco Demolition Night was organized by Chicago DJ Steve Dahl and hosted at Comiskey Park, the home of the Chicago White Sox. The promotion was a stunt to attract more fans to a baseball doubleheader between the White Sox and the Detroit Tigers. Fans were invited to bring the disco records to the stadium, which were then collected and blown up in between the two games. Dahl, who had been vocally anti-disco on the radio, led the crowd in chants of "Disco sucks" before detonating the records. The explosion caused a riot as fans stormed the field, resulting in an extensive damage to the stadium. The second game of the doubleheader was eventually canceled due to the chaos. The event was widely covered in the media and became a symbolic movement in the anti-disco cultural brigade, I guess.
He took to the field in a Jeep at the command of his ragged army. His troops greeted him as a conquering hero as he seized the microphone.
All these clowns who paid 98 cents to get in the ballpark were going to have their moment of glory, and I thought it would happen very rapidly.
1, 2, 3, boom!
The main attraction, the Disco Demolition, spearheaded by morning radio man Steve Dahl and his anti-disco army called the Insane Coho Lift.
Oh, that felt good.
Steve Dahl, a disco-hating radio DJ, thought it'd be hilarious to blow up hundreds of disco records in center field. Much to the dismay of those that approved the stunt, about 7,000 people bum-rushed the field, inciting a riot.
Many of the fans are scattering off the field now when they fight the police.
The baseball game never happened. This moment went down in history as the night disco died.
The death of disco was a cultural movement fueled by musical, social, and economic factors. dominance in the mainstream. It also set the stage for the evolution of modern dance music and the enduring legacy of disco's impact on the global music culture. Black queer Americans were making global impact, and racist bros who listened to Kiss and Lynyrd Skynyrd were not okay with being decentered.
I was an usher, taking people to their seated ball games while saving up money for my first synthesizer. Steve Dahl was on the radio saying that disco sucked. He was frustrated because he had been fired from DAI because they changed from a rock format to a disco format. I was on the ground at the front gate, and all of the records that were piling up at the gate weren't necessarily disco records. Most of them were just black records. The message was, well, if you're black or you're gay, then you're not one of us. You're not truly a Chicagoan.
While on the surface, it appeared to be a protest against a musical genre, the context and nature of the backlash revealed deeper societal prejudices. To hate disco in this context is to be pro-bigotry. It's the same notion that people on the right will say about blue-haired they-thems who are vegans. They know what they're saying when they say stuff like that, just like they knew what they were saying when they said they were not fans of disco music. They're dog whistles. You have to remember, this is post-Jim Crow era. Seeing black people on television dominating musical spaces and queer people dominating musical spaces was a culture shock to a lot of these conservatives at the time. Disco music and the nightclub scene were particularly popular also among women of all races, providing a space for enjoyment and liberation on the dance floor. Women could wear whatever they want, be whoever they want, and be with whoever they want in a disco club. The backlash against disco can be seen as a reaction against this sort of female and feminine empowerment, which critics often dismissed the genre as frivolous and superficial. That's where the jokes around Saturday Night Fever came around, or disco being chick music came around. It's because women liked disco. The derogatory dismissal of disco music often included sexist language and attitudes. Critics belittled the genre by associating it with femininity, which was devalued in comparison to the perceived masculinity of rock music, which is so funny to think about what happened after disco supposedly died. Hair metal came in the 80s in full force, and you know without a doubt, maybe nobody has made this connection before, but I did, that they got influenced by disco, by seeing people playing with gender fluidity and androgyny in disco clubs. They did not like them, but they sold their whole swag, bar for bar, word for word.
Kiss me through the phone.
He copied my whole fucking flow.
Oh,
word for word, bar for bar.
Oh,
don't act like I didn't.
The late 1970s were a time of significant social change, with ongoing movements for civil rights, gender equality, and queer rights. The backlash against disco should have been seen as a broader conservative reaction against these progressive changes. Music genres often carry political, cultural, and identifying markers. The attack on disco was also an attack on the identities and communities that had embraced it. It was a rejection of the racial, sexual, and gender diversity that disco represented. The genre, which had been at its peak of its popularity, quickly fell out of favor, reflected a deeper societal discomfort with the changing cultural landscape, particularly the increasing visible and influential experiences of these marginalized communities. And I would like to also mention that the death of disco led to the birth of Ronald Reagan. All these things are connected. Every time there is a moment of progress that marginalized communities have, the right will backlash, which is where we are now. For the past 30 years, marginalized groups created really great strides. Queer people, people of color, the disabled, everybody who is marginalized. We've been fighting for our rights and making progress in the last 30 years. And that's why there's been so much backlash lately. They are doing the anti-disco night, but every day. As disco declined, other music genres such as punk rock, new wave, and the emergent sounds of hip-hop began to gain popularity. Many former disco artists and producers transitioned into these new genres or adapted their styles. For marginalized groups like the Black, brown, and queer communities that still embrace disco, the party still went on. Smaller, more underground, but they persisted.
There was sort of a them and us. And I think that us was strong because we went further underground. We went deeper.
I had heard all kinds of rumors and things about, you know, being a gay club. But once you got into the music, none of that even mattered anymore.
The Warehouse was a members-only club. They want people to go there and not bring any of that outside shit in. You know, no homophobia, no sexism towards women.
Disco simply just evolved. Disco's death place was inevitably and cosmically designed as the birthplace of house music, disco's lasting legacy, by the same black, brown, and queer people who were targeted in disco's demise. House music, a genre of electronic dance music, originated in Chicago in the early 1980s. It evolved from the disco scene and became a pivotal movement that shaped the future of electronic music worldwide. From the ashes of disco, DJs in Chicago sought to create a new sound that retained the danceable elements of disco, but with a more modern and electronic feel. The name house music was derived from the Warehouse, a Chicago nightclub where DJ Frankie Knuckles, a black queer man, often referred to as the godfather of house, was a resident DJ. From 1977 to 1982, Knuckles played a mix of disco, soul, and funk music, incorporating drum machines and synthesizers to create a new genre and sound.
It is disco music, you know, so it's not really that much different. See, the thing about it is that in the middle, like in the middle 70s, you know, and the early 80s, it was all disco music then. You know, there's so much stuff that was produced, I mean, and really produced well and put out on the market, you know, and the thing about it is that a lot of it got past the city, you know, and the city on a whole, but as far as, like, you know, the Warehouse was concerned, it was the only after-hours club here, you know, and I was allowed to get away with anything I wanted to when it came to, you know, putting music on for them.
The disco fad quickly faded. Underground dance music lived on. In 1977, DJ Frankie Knuckles moved to Chicago from New York and began a 6-year stint at the Warehouse, helping to inspire what became known as house music.
House music is the bastard child of disco. House came from that.
Frankie, originally from New York, moved to Chicago to create more music. Knuckles began experimenting with reel-to-reel tape edits and drum machines to extend and remix tracks. His innovative style at the Warehouse laid to groundwork for house music. Frankie was once quoted as saying that house music was disco's revenge.
Right, exactly. At the end of the day, that's all it is. But I'm really sick of people, especially in the beginning, where it's like, well, what is house music? What is house? You know, it's like, what do you mean? What is it? Why do I have to draw a picture? Well, you know, for the benefit of those people that live in the Midwest that don't know. Let me tell you something. Those people that live in the Midwest that don't know don't need to know. I don't need to draw a picture for them. And when I used to give that kind of answer to certain journalists, they would look at me like I'm crazy. You know, or sometimes my managers or people would be like, you know, you have to give a better answer than that. That's not working. And I'm like, look, you people don't understand. Right. I'm like, you people don't understand. This is where I come from. I'm not concerning myself about the benefit of those people in the Midwest who might be reading this in the newspaper that need to have this drawn out for them. You know what I mean? Then, I mean, this story is not going to mean anything to them one way or another. However, there might be some people that live in their town that know what this is, and I don't have to draw it out for them because they already know. They've been. They've experienced it. They know what it is.
Do you have a favorite DJ?
House music at that time, it was anything that Frankie Knuckles would play at the Warehouse, which was the coolest underground dance music.
Some groups you wouldn't hear anywhere else except for the Warehouse, which is what you would crave. Like, I only heard that song here.
You'd have Europe and Philadelphia and New York all playing on the same dance floor.
No matter what style of music was, if it fit into the set, it worked. So you heard all sounds, textures in the course of a night.
Larry Levan's style and influence reached Chicago, inspiring local DJs and producers. Producers like Jesse Saunders, Marshall Jefferson, and Chip E began creating original tracks that incorporated the electronic beats and bass lines characteristic of house music. Saunders' 1984 track, On and On, is often credited as the first house record.
This is a test pressing of On and On, Jesse Saunders. It turned out to be a classic,
And as you see, it's probably brand new.
I had become pretty popular as a DJ. Vince Lawrence started coming around and brought me his record.
I think I was 17 years old. I had put together my group of friends, Z Factor, and we had written our first song, Fast Cars.
I wanted to keep him around to kind of pick his brain because I had ideas to make a record. At the time, I played this bootleg mashup with Donna Summer, Toot Toot Hey Beep Beep in it, and it had the horn from Funky Town. It had such a mesmerizing groove that I thought it would be perfect to be kind of a signature song for me. But somebody stole my records, and that was one of them. And it pissed me off so much that I decided that I was gonna make my own version. So Vince Lawrence and I are in my bedroom, which at the time was our studio. I have my 4-track recorder, my Poly 61, and an 808.
Roland said that the 808 was designed as a practice device, but for us, you know, this was the beginning. We just really wanted to make a record that would move people the way the best parts of the best songs move people at those parties.
I think I had $800 to my name at the time, and met Larry Sherman, who ran the pressing plant, and said, hey, I want to get, you know, as many 12-inch records of this as I can get. So we started pressing. We learned the pressing process. We'd be at the plant, packaging them ourselves, picking them up and just taking them to the stores and selling them. It started snowballing so much that we had to come down here to this basement, and we formulated it like a business. I remember standing right here when they did the ABC TV News interview, and I first told them that I wanted to be the next Motown and Berry Gordy at Just Say Records.
We went from store to store to store like a paper route. And we might have sold 10 or 12,000 records that first week. I said, fuck parties, we're in the record business now.
Recording studios like Chicago tracks became hubs for house music production. Many early house tracks were produced and recorded here, contributing to the genre's distinctive sound. Labels such as Trax Records and DJ International played crucial roles in promoting and distributing house music. Trax Records, founded by Larry Sherman, released many seminal house tracks, including Move Your Body by Marshall Jefferson and No Way Back by Adonis.
One day at the post office, I just heard this beat in my head. I said, man, this is a cut. So I told Curtis, I said, dude, we're going to the studio today. I played them chords. I did the drums. Oh, this is the hottest I've ever heard. Fellas, get to the studio. We need an intro solo. And I heard piano. That's it. That's magic, brother. That's magic. Then get the dude in, sing the lead vocals. Curtis McLean is the dude.
So Marshall handed me this piece of paper, and I'm reading the piece of paper, and it was like, gotta have house music all night long. So when I originally sang it, I sang it in an R&B voice.
Gotta have house music all night long. With that house music, you can't go wrong.
We stopped. And Marshall was like, nah, dude. He's like, man, he's like, punch it.
I said, dude, you have to sing Gotta Have House on the drum roll. Dum, 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 dum.
Gotta have house music all night long. With that house music, you can't go wrong.
A subgenre of house music, acid house, emerged in Chicago with tracks like Future's acid tracks characterized by the squelching sounds of the Roland TB-303 bass synthesizer.
Rocking the main stage in front of 40,000 people. Not bad for a couple of blokes pushing buttons, you might say. But technology has always been at the heart of dance music. In 1987, a couple of househeads from Chicago stumbled across a piece of equipment in a second-hand store that would kickstart a musical revolution.
For those that don't know, this here is called a Roland TB-303 bass line. Me and Spanky and a group called Future, we picked this up at a secondhand shop for 40 bucks. And this was basically designed to emulate a bass guitar. And it did a real crappy job of it. But I realized that, yo, I could make this bass sound do like some weird stuff. So I was like, I'm gonna just twist these knobs in a crazy way because I like warping that sound. And I was like, all right, let me start twisting the knobs. And then it was like jamming like this. And we just, yeah, keep doing it. He said, Pierre, keep doing it. So I was like, okay, I'm turning the knobs. And then we thought it sounded real crazy. And then I started turning it like this. And then we was like, oh, that's it right there, that's it.
The resulting tune was Acid Tracks. Our number 9, a relentless 12-minute 303 mind warp which single-handedly invented an entire new sound, Acid House.
When Acid Tracks came out, they lost their minds. You know, I don't know what happened, man, with that song. You know, it's something just like that machine, that TB-303, it triggers brain cells and stuff.
It didn't really have a beginning or middle or an end. It just was. There's a point of genius.
This was groundbreaking DIY music being made on a shoestring budget. Now everybody could get involved.
It's very cheaply done, very affordable, very street, very gritty, which is what the scene was all about.
Technology was coming down in price at the time, so suddenly you could afford to buy bits of kit to make these records. There's a bit of that punk rock spirit. Anyone can do it, just get up and do it.
You were in control. You didn't have to go to outside agents and knock on the door and say, please, can I make some art in your studio? You didn't have to ask anybody's permission.
By now, club kids were firing the music's evolution. In late '85, a couple of music box fans spawned a new style of house by abusing a machine designed for karaoke.
But basically, we started using the 303 just to try to make bass lines, because when we first started making music, it sucked. So I made this rhythm, what you hear playing right now.
And it's just playing straight. He said, but I can't figure out how to work this thing. It's still doing this weird, like, sound, you know. It's like, I don't know how to program it. So he's like, maybe you could figure out how to program it, because it didn't come with a book. And so I was like, instead of trying to program it, I just started turning knobs. I was like, and he's like, well, what you doing? I was like, I'm turning these knobs. He said, keep doing that. I'm like, I'm turning the knobs. And we just sitting there for like 30, 40 minutes. I'm just turning knobs. And like, yeah, I like that. I like that.
There's been 5,000 acid house records after that one, and nobody did it like Pierre. Pierre did it in a musical way that followed the mood of the song. Everybody else just turned knobs, man. No, it's never been done like that.
So if anybody would be daring enough to play this, it'll be Ron Hardy.
He ended up playing it 4 times that night. The first time he played it, the people didn't really know how to react to it.
He played it again. People was looking like, I guess it's early, he playing some crazy stuff.
The 4th time, they lost their mind. And that was the birth of acid right there.
Ron Hardy gave me DJ Pierre's tape.
Marshall Jefferson was the ear for Larry Sherman. Larry Sherman had no clue what was going on with the music.
You know, I said, Larry, you gotta put this out. You gotta put it out. He said, there's no words on it. I said, yeah, but you said that about Can You Feel It?
Acid house quickly gained popularity and spread to the UK and Europe. House music's infectious rhythms and grooves resonated globally. By the late 1980s, it had a significant impact on the UK dance scene, leading to the Second Summer of Love in 1988 to 1989. Chicago radio stations like WBMX and WGCI played a crucial role in popularizing house music. DJs such as the Hot Mix 5 brought house music to a wider audience throughout their innovative mixes.
WBMX is a Chicago radio station that was home to a legendary group of DJs called the Hot Mix 5.
The Hot Mix 5 on WBMX, Chicago's #1 dance party.
Here's another hot mix on the 102.7 FM.
These DJs played a pivotal role in popularizing house music. From Ralphie Rosario,
This is Ralphie Rosario of Audio Talent Record Pool,
to Farley Jackmaster Funk.
With Farley Jackmaster Funk on 102.7 FM.
Through the 1980s, the Hot Mix 5 went from remixing disco records live on the air to playing original house music tracks that Chicago DJs produced. It's estimated that 1 million people in Chicago tuned into their show every Saturday night. Fans would record these programs on cassettes and share them around the world.
House music continued to evolve, giving rise to various subgenres such as deep house, tech house, and progressive house. Artists and producers around the world continue to push the boundaries of the genre. House music's emphasis on inclusivity, community, and the dance floor experience has left a lasting cultural legacy. It continues to inspire new generations of musicians, DJs, and dancers. House music remains a dynamic and influential genre, deeply rooted in Chicago's musical and cultural history. Its evolution from the clubs of Chicago to a global phenomenon underscores the city's significant contribution to the world of music. And would you imagine that while all of this was happening across Lake Michigan in Detroit, Black and queer musicians were doing the same exact thing? Unbelievable. Techno music, a genre of electronic dance music, has deep roots in Detroit, Michigan. The city's history with techno is intertwined with its socio-economic conditions, its cultural significance, and the innovative spirit of all of the musicians.
Maybe Detroit was economically depressed, but musically rich than a motherfucker.
Collaboration is a thing that comes naturally here in Detroit. Because we've been failed time and time again by government, because we've been failed by systems, we've learned to naturally depend on community.
We know each other because we're of this place.
Detroit in the 1970s was a city facing significant economic challenges due to the decline of the automobile industry. This decline resulted in high unemployment rates and social unrest, creating an environment where new forms of artistic expression could thrive. Detroit had a rich musical heritage, especially in soul, funk, and Motown sounds. These genres influenced the early sounds of techno. European electronic music groups from artists like Kraftwerk also significantly impacted Detroit's future techno pioneers. And as a techno head, Kraftwerk is amazing, and we should give them their flowers. The core figures of the birth of Detroit techno are often referred to as the Belleville Three: Juan Atkins, Derek May, and Kevin Saunderson. They were high school friends from Belleville, a suburb of Detroit, who were deeply influenced by the eclectic radio show of DJ Charles, the electrifying Mojo Johnson. Often called the godfather of techno, Juan Atkins was influenced by Kraftwerk and Parliament Funkadelic alike. He coined the term techno, and with Rick Davis, formed the group Cybertron, producing tracks like Alleys of Your Mind and Clear, which laid the groundwork for techno.
The country was in economic recession, AIDS was devastating communities, auto industry had gone to hell. Around that time, Detroit got dubbed the murder capital of the country, and yet that's when the birth of techno came about. Young people took control over their futures and rewrote the future in terms of saying that, look, we see something better.
We had no idea that the rhythms that would go inside of these drum machines would not just change our lives, but it would change music history.
A lot of people, and I would include myself in that, didn't know. We didn't know who made this music.
Derek Mays' tracks such as Strings of Life under the alias Rhythm is Rhythm blended emotional string with electronic beats, defining the early Detroit techno sound. Kevin Saunderson, known for infusing techno with house elements, Saunderson's group Inner City produced hits like Good Life and Big Fun, which brought Detroit techno to a broader audience. Formed by Jeff Mills, Mad Mike Banks, and Robert Hood, Underground Resistance brought a militant Afrocentric philosophy to techno, emphasizing independence from the mainstream music industry.
This is the voice you are. This is the voice you are. This is the voice.
the future. It's jazz of the people. This is not techno. This is not techno. No. This is high-tech jazz.
UR was a big-ass team. I've always enjoyed it, the fights, the shows, you know, doing some futuristic, progressive shit. And in some instances, being a role model, I guess.
Their music was harder and more political, reflecting the socio-economic conditions of Detroit. Artists like Carl Craig, Stacey Pullen, and Kenny Larkin emerged, each bringing their unique style to techno. Craig's label, Planet E Communications, became influential in promoting the Detroit techno sound. My personal favorite techno artist is Drexciya for a few different reasons. Not only is this music some of the most incredible production I've ever heard, but it has a deep political message behind it.
Please use extra caution as you pass the Aqua construction site on the side of the Aquabahn. I repeat.
Drexciya. The duo of James Stinson and Gerald Donald were the most important electro artists of the 90s. As part of the underground resistance crew, they helped pioneer a harder, Detroit-focused strain of the genre. But where their fellow Detroiters looked to outer space for inspiration, Drexciya went under the sea.
Hello, this is Drexciya coming in from the deep end.
Tell me about the ideas and concepts behind Drexciya.
The mythology of Drexciya was first explained in the liner notes of a compilation called The Quest. The notes describe pregnant African slaves thrown overboard on their voyage to America after they were deemed ill and disruptive. The women ended up giving birth to babies that never needed air, leading to the creation of the Drexciyan tribes, who advanced far beyond the human race.
I want to do something that involved a total concept and take people somewhere else instead of giving them the same thing that they see every single day when they step outside the door.
Donald and Stinson lived in Detroit, a technology-obsessed city that was in decay.
You know, there's a lot of rough characters in Detroit, and from top to bottom and left to right. You begin to create what you think the world should be, what you think life should be for everyone else, and I think it developed from that.
Detroit techno is a testament to the city's resilience and creativity, transforming the challenges of post-industrial decline into a powerful and enduring musical genre.
Detroit is known for its auto industry and music scene. It's now also considered the place where the first techno tracks were created. This is often forgotten.
You know, Detroit comes and goes and comes and goes like it's like a cycle. I added the funk, the soul and the funk from Detroit.
The decline of industry in Detroit and the dawn of a new technological age inspired Juan Atkins and other musicians in the early 80s to experiment with futuristic sounds. They mixed European electro music with African-American dance beats.
I guess the arrival of the technological revolution, so to speak, it was the industrial age kind of came to a close. And by Detroit being one of the major industrial hubs in America, the city was kind of like just depleted because the robots took over most of the manufacturing jobs.
They experimented with new electro sounds and were celebrated as techno rebels.
It was just a kid and later some more kids just tinkering with this new technology. You know, a lot of this was kind of spontaneous. I mean, nobody had a blueprint or a plan. I mean, we had an idea of things, what we wanted to do, sort of like an experiment. You mix a lot of different ingredients, and the result came out 10 times better than we thought it would come out, you know.
In the cases of disco, house, and techno, cultural erasure has occurred. For many years of my life, I assumed house and techno were genres created and for white people only, and that we were outsiders to the genre. This has happened to me also as a newer producer and musician. I primarily make techno and hard techno music.
You never really knew me. 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 You never really knew me.
And have had arrogant white male producers downplay my abilities as if I'm an outsider to the genre. As I mentioned in the hardcore video I made, this attitude stems directly from white supremacy. There is no gatekeeping to creating art or music. If you have a song in your heart, make that shit before you get what you wrote. But I think, similar to how I didn't know personally that black people made house and techno, people are just uninformed on the history, so they assume it was a white dude. But this is a part of why I'm making this video. Most of the art you love and appreciate came from marginalized groups, primarily black queer people. The slang you say, the television and movies you watch, the makeup you use, the style you emulate, most likely have its origins in black queer culture globally. There's an active erasure happening, and I want to use this opportunity to speak the truth. The historical erasure of black queer kids in the creation of house and techno music is crucial to counteract and rectify for several important reasons. Black queer individuals were at the forefront of house and techno music movements. Acknowledging their contributions ensures that the true history of these genres are told. Pioneers like Frankie Knuckles, Larry Heard, and Derek May made foundational contributions to the music, and their stories need to be highlighted. Counteracting erasure helps maintain the integrity of the music industry and music history. When the origins of house and techno are properly attributed to black and queer communities, it corrects the record and prevents the whitewashing of cultural achievements. When young black and queer individuals see themselves represented in the history of music, it can be incredibly empowering. It shows them that they too can be innovators and leaders in their own fields. You won't think DJing techno is some white people shit when you find out that teenagers who created techno were black teenagers in Detroit. You won't think being in a punk band is not for you once you hear about bands like Death and Pure Hell. You won't think it's impossible for you to be a black trans artist once you see black trans artists. It is not you who is the outsider, dear one. Recognizing the role of black queer individuals in these genres validates their identity and experiences. It affirms that their contributions are valuable and that they have played a significant role in shaping contemporary culture. By highlighting the contributions of black queer individuals, we actively combat the racism and homophobia that contributed to their erasure. It challenges prejudices and promotes a more inclusive and equitable understanding of cultural history and music. Rectifying historical erasure promotes diversity and inclusion within the music industry and society as a whole. It encourages a broader appreciation for the diverse origins of cultural phenomena and fosters an environment where all contributions are respected and celebrated, no matter how small. Accurate historical recognition can lead to more equitable economic opportunities. Pioneers and their descendants can receive the recognition and financial rewards they deserve, whether through royalties, opportunities, or other forms of acknowledgement.
You've likely heard this song, but do you know the singer behind it? In 1990, Martha Wash became the iconic voice behind one of the most memorable song intros of all time. But she didn't get the credit she deserved until much later. For starters, Martha's name wasn't featured in the credits of the song or the album CNC Music Factory released. But what makes it worse is that Martha wasn't even featured in the music video. She was replaced by the model Zelma Davis, who lip-synced her lines because the label deemed Martha unmarketable. It wasn't the first time this happened either. She sang on 3 dance number 1s for Black Box and was replaced by a model for all of those music videos. After some legal wrangling, she was given proper credit for her contribution, where the music video now stated additional vocals by Martha Wash, visualized by Zelma Davis.
Recognizing the contributions of black queer individuals can also lead to greater support for contemporary artists from marginalized communities. It helps ensure that they have the same access to opportunities and resources as their peers. Properly attributing the origins of house and techno helps preserve the cultural heritage of black communities and black queer communities. It ensures that the artistic legacies of these pioneers are not lost or forgotten over time. An accurate historical record is essential for educational purpose. It allows educators and those who archive social history to teach the true origins of these genres and the cultural context in which they developed, fostering a more comprehensive understanding of music and music history. Recognizing the creative origins of house and techno music can inspire ongoing innovation within these genres. Understanding the groundbreaking work of Black queer pioneers encourages contemporary artists to build their legacy in new and innovative ways. When the true history is acknowledged and celebrated, recognizing the contributions of Black queer individuals can also lead to greater support for contemporary artists from marginalized communities. It helps ensure that they have the same access to opportunities and resources as their peers. Properly attributing the origins of house and techno helps preserve the cultural heritage of Black communities and Black queer communities. It ensures that the artistic legacies of these pioneers are not lost or forgotten over time. An accurate historical record is essential for educational purpose. It allows educators and those who archive social history to teach the true origins of these genres and the cultural context in which they developed, fostering a more comprehensive understanding of music and music history. Recognizing the creative origins of house and techno music can inspire ongoing innovation within these genres. Understanding the groundbreaking work of Black queer pioneers encourages contemporary artists to build their legacy in new and innovative ways. When the true history is acknowledged and celebrated, it enriches the cultural dialogue and supports the continued evolution of music. It ensures that the genres remain dynamic and reflective of their diverse roots, counteracting and rectifying the historical erasure of Black queer kids in the creation of house and techno music. And in culture in general, let's be so real. By doing so, we honor the true origins of these genres and create a more inclusive and accurate representation of music history. This is my love letter to all queer people, but especially my Black queer friends and family. Know that you possess a special kind of beauty and magic that cannot be replicated by anyone. Continue to create and shine, and I'll continue to be right here dancing with you. Peace.